The lights were bright, cameras rolled. The CNN Global Leadership Forum was live in over 100 countries. Oprah Winfrey sat center stage behind a long glass table, her voice calm but firm. To her left were a series of political experts, authors, and diplomats. And on her rotund spectacles sat Chris Pratt. He hadn't been on the original guest list. His appearance came as a shock. The actor, known for action films and lighthearted interviews, now found himself under global scrutiny. The segment was titled Celebrity Influence in Democracy. Oprah turned to him with a slow smile. "Chris," she said, "you've spoken about God, freedom, and responsibility. But your political comments, especially during the last election, made headlines. Many felt they were tone-deaf, even dangerous." Chris shifted slightly in his chair. His suit was crisp. His hands rested quietly on the table. "I understand why some people saw it that way," he began. "But Oprah cut him off. "You didn't endorse a candidate. You posted a picture of yourself hunting in the woods while cities were burning. Do you believe that was responsible? Or were you just hiding?" The room grew tense. Even the diplomats paused. This was no light interview. "I wasn't hiding," Chris said, more firmly now. "I was trying to stay out of a war. I didn't start." Oprah raised an eyebrow. "A war? Is that how you see American democracy?" Chris didn't respond right away. The silence was sharp. Then Oprah looked down at her tablet and brought up a clip. The screen behind them lit up. It was Denzel Washington in a past forum, speaking about the responsibility of public figures. "We shape empathy." Denzel had said, "We decide if this country listens to a stranger's pain or ignores it, and we must be better." The audience applauded the old clip. Oprah turned back to Chris. "Denzel said that 4 years ago. Do you think your actions have shaped empathy?" Chris looked around at the cameras, at the diplomats, at the audience watching him like a courtroom. Then he took a breath. "There's something I haven't told anyone," he said. Oprah leaned forward. Chris adjusted his mic. 6 years ago, I worked on a small film called The Quiet Brother. It was based on a true story about a boy in a refugee camp. We shot it in Turkey. One of the boys who helped us translate, his name was Ismail, was only 13. The room grew quiet. After we left, got a letter from him. He said he watched our film every day in the camp. He started a little acting group with other kids. Said it made them feel human again. Chris swallowed hard. 3 years later, I got a call from someone in the State Department. Ismail had helped stop a radical group from recruiting in the camp. His drama group had exposed them. My film helped make that possible. Oprah blinked. "But here's the part I never told the press," Chris continued. "The government asked me to go back, quietly, not as an actor, but as a civilian liaison. They believed we could use culture, not weapons, to fight radicalism. So I went. I helped start more drama programs. I met with tribal leaders. I spoke. 2 kids who only knew war. Whispers swept through the studio. Phones buzzed in laps. Social media was already lighting up. Chris looked directly at Oprah now. "You want to know if I shaped empathy? I didn't post about it. I didn't film it. But yes, I tried. Not in tweets. On the ground." The audience was silent. Oprah's expression had changed. Was no longer sharp. Was uncertain. "You're saying you were involved in a classified cultural program?" she asked. Slowly, Chris nodded. "Yes, I'm probably not even supposed to say it now, but I think people need to know some things don't fit in a hashtag." The cameras zoomed in. Oprah leaned back, her hands slightly trembling on the desk. Then, sudden alert appeared on a screen behind them. Breaking. Actor Chris Pratt claims involvement in U.S. cultural intelligence operation. Journalists in the crowd stood up. Someone dropped a pen. A woman in the third row gasped. Chris sat still. Oprah tried to regain control. This is very serious, Chris. I know," he said. "But I'm done being silent so people don't feel uncomfortable. Lights didn't seem so bright anymore. The air in the studio felt like glass, fragile, ready to crack. And then ... applause. It started slow, a few claps, then more. Then the entire room stood up. The clip went viral in minutes. Hashtag Chris Pratt Truth trended in 40 countries. The White House declined comment. CNN analysts went into emergency coverage. Backstage producers yelled into earpieces. Oprah was rushed off stage. Chris remained seated, alone under the lights. He looked out at the crowd, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a performer. He felt like a witness. Something had begun. Something far bigger than a stage. Asterisk. The White House Situation Room was silent. Not even the hum of the monitors dared interrupt the tension. On the screen, frozen mid-frame, was Chris Pratt still sitting, calmly under the studio lights after dropping one of the most unexpected public confessions in recent media history. President Walters sat at the end of the long table, flanked by her national security advisor and the director of intelligence. The CNN forum had been over for 15 minutes, but the consequences had only just begun. "Confirm again," the president said quietly. "Was he part of the project?" The director nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Civilian liaison. Operated under the Cultural Stability Initiative codename Violet Echo, Middle East Region. Authorized under Executive Order 17-9. The president leaned back. "Jesus, we thought his file was locked," the NSA muttered. "He wasn't supposed to speak publicly. Clearly, no one told him that." Back at CNN headquarters, producers were scrambling. The entire forum segment had gone from routine political debate to explosive global revelation. Oprah Winfrey had locked herself in her dressing room. Her team wasn't answering press calls. Rumors of legal consequences were already circulating. In a nearby hallway, a woman in a navy trench coat walked quickly toward a secured elevator. Her name was Noor al-Rahimi, a journalist with a reputation for walking into chaos and walking out with the truth. She had been watching the segment from a cafe across the street. By the time Chris mentioned Violet Echo, she was already on her way to the building. Noor had covered covert influence operations during her years with Al Jazeera. But never one involving a Hollywood actor, a refugee boy, and the U.S. State Department. She dialed a number on her burner phone. "It's real," she whispered. Violet Echo wasn't shut down. And Chris Pratt just blew it open. The voice on the other end replied in Arabic, fast and tense. "Careful, Noor. That name gets people." Killed. Back inside the CNN building, Chris was being ushered through a private hallway by 2 security officers. He wasn't being detained yet, but there were murmurs about him remaining available for questioning. A CNN executive, red-faced and sweating, caught up to him. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "You just revealed state secrets on international TV." Chris stopped walking. "I told the truth," he said. "You want to arrest me?" For that, the executive opened his mouth to respond, but his earpiece buzzed. "They're calling it a leak. We've got the Pentagon on the line and ... The Turkish embassy." Chris blinked. "What?" The executive didn't answer. He just walked away, speaking rapidly into his mic. Meanwhile, across the globe, the story was already creating waves. In Istanbul, government officials were preparing a formal statement. They wanted answers about American influence in their refugee programs. In Lebanon, civil rights groups held emergency press conferences. In Jordan, a youth-led political group posted a statement thanking the actor who remembered the forgotten. Back in D.C., Noor slipped into her underground office beneath a bookstore. She pulled out her encrypted hard drive and opened a file labeled VECHOOP6. It contained an image. Grainy, date stamped 2018. A tent camp. Children performing a play. Standing at the back, partially hidden behind a curtain, Chris Pratt. She zoomed in. The boy beside him was young, thin, wide-eyed Ismail. She whispered, "You were real." A second file confirmed her. Suspicion: the camp had later been targeted in a drone strike. Officially, it was described as a terrorist recruitment hub. Unofficially, Noor had always suspected something else. She hadn't had the proof until now. At Langley, inside CIA headquarters, a red folder was dropped on the director's desk. The front read, Operation Violet Echo Contingency Protocol. Triggered inside were photos, transcripts, and a list of people to be monitored. Chris Pratt's name was first. Oprah Winfrey's was second. The file also contained a memo stamped in bold red. Do not contact subject without presidential clearance. But it was too late. Oprah had already left the studio. She was on her way to Chris's hotel. She needed answers. She needed the truth. As her car sped through the rainy New York streets, Oprah sat in silence. Her phone buzzed with calls and texts she ignored. In her mind, she replayed the look on Chris's face. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't politics. It was something deeper. Older, like someone who had carried a secret too long and had finally decided to burn the weight down to ash. As the hotel neared, Oprah looked out the window and whispered to herself, "What the hell have we all been part of?" And far away, in a desert town forgotten by headlines, a grown man watched the interview replay on a cracked phone screen. He smiled, eyes wet. "Chris," he said softly in Arabic, "you remembered?" Then he stood and picked up a folder with a logo on the front. Movement for Cultural Liberation, Founding Charter. The world had changed in one interview, but it hadn't ended. It had just begun. The air in Washington, D.C. was unusually thick, not with fog or humidity, but tension. That strange weight that falls over a city when too many powerful people are trying to figure out how to protect secrets they no longer control. Noor al-Rahimi had felt it before. She'd seen it in Cairo, in Gaza, in Istanbul, before governments fell and history rewrote itself. Now she was in the center of the storm, holding a file that might do the same to the United States. She sat in a private booth at a quiet restaurant in Georgetown. Across from her was a man in his mid-50s, sunglasses pushed into his hair, voice low. His name was Carl Morgan. He used to work for the State Department before he retired. A word Noor had learned usually meant silenced, paid off, or threatened. Violet Echo wasn't just a cultural outreach project, Carl said. It was designed as a counter-recruitment. Weapon, art, film, theater. We planted those tools in refugee zones. And then used them to shape the minds of future leaders. Noor narrowed her eyes. You mean kids? Carl hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, kids. Boys like Ismail. We weren't just showing them how to act, we were showing them who to trust. Who the enemy was. Who the hero was. All through story. Noor's stomach turned. And Chris Pratt? She asked. Carl let out a breath. He was never fully in. That's why they liked him. Believable? Clean image. They thought he was too dumb to ask questions. But when he went back, saw too much. Started talking to people we didn't sanction. And the camp that got bombed. Carl looked down. That wasn't part of the plan. Noor sat back, heart pounding. The puzzle was becoming clear. Pratt had been used as a pawn in a shadow war. Oprah, knowingly or not, had triggered the bombshell by cornering him on live TV, and now the world wanted to know what exactly was Violet Echo. As she left the restaurant, Noor noticed two men in suits on the far sidewalk. They weren't eating. They weren't talking. They were watching. She took the back exit. That night in Istanbul, a video went viral. A masked man, his face blurred. His voice distorted, claimed to be a survivor of the same refugee camp where The Quiet Brother was filmed. In the video, he said the U.S. government had used the film to gather intelligence on resistance groups, and that several boys who participated in the drama program were later detained or disappeared. Within hours, thousands were marching through the streets of Ankara and Beirut. Signs read, "We are not your story." Others showed Chris Pratt's face crossed out in red, but just as many held up posters that read, "Thank you, Chris. We know the truth." Back in New York, Chris sat in his hotel room, TV muted, his phone vibrating nonstop. He hadn't left since the interview. There was a knock on the door, then another. Slow, heavy. He opened it. Oprah stood there in a black coat, no makeup, eyes tired but intense. Chris stepped back and let her in without a word. "I didn't come to fight," she said softly. "I didn't come to talk to the media," Chris replied. "But here we are." They sat. The silence lasted a full minute. Then Oprah broke it. "You were telling the truth." Chris nodded. "I didn't want to be part of it, but they told me I could help. That my film was saving lives. Oh, and maybe it did for a while. But then it became something else." Oprah's eyes were glassy. "They used us. You, me. Denzel. All of us. We were part of a machine." Chris looked out the window. "No, we were the machine." Meanwhile, Noor was on the move again. She had arranged to meet someone from the European Diplomatic Corps, an official who had investigated the CIA's influence campaigns during the Arab Spring. She waited in a parking garage, the kind of place where you could disappear just by turning off the lights. The official arrived, a tall man with a French accent and a tired smile. "You're brave to dig this deep," he said, handing her a flash drive. "This is from Brussels. Unredacted, every time a film was used as a soft tool, it was logged." Noor plugged it into her tablet. As the files loaded, her eyes widened. Not just The Quiet Brother. There were over 50 American films and documentaries, listed, many of them Oscar-nominated, used in over 20 countries. Each one tied to psychological objectives: disrupt radicalism, promote loyalty, encourage compliance. This wasn't a single operation. It was a doctrine. Suddenly, her tablet blinked. Remote access attempt detected. She pulled the drive, shut it down, and ran. In D.C., the president met privately with the CIA director. "We need to control this before it becomes an international scandal," she said. The director didn't blink. "Then we need to control the sources. The journalist, the actor, and Oprah." But none of them were planning to stay quiet. Because by now, the world had stopped asking if Violet Echo was real. They were asking, how deep does it go? The storm reached London by dawn. Parliament members were already gathered in closed-door briefings. MI6 had forwarded portions of Noor al-Rahimi's leaked drive to senior intelligence officials. What they saw confirmed their worst fears: British schools, refugee charities, and even theater programs in Birmingham had unknowingly partnered with American initiatives tied to Violet Echo. The United States wasn't just using culture to fight extremism. They were using it to shape democracies. Meanwhile, back in New York, Chris Pratt was hiding in plain sight. The hotel had moved him to a more secure floor. An off-duty FBI agent was assigned to observe him under the excuse of public safety. But Chris knew what it really meant: surveillance. He sat on the bed, TV off, his mind replaying the footage from the night before. His face was everywhere, now on billboards, news panels, memes. In some, he was a hero. In others, a traitor. There was a knock. Again, only this time, it wasn't Oprah. A young woman entered, mid-30s, sharp blazer, no smile. "Mr. Pratt," she said calmly, "I'm Agent Rachel Klein, Domestic Security Division. I need to speak with you about your statements regarding Operation Violet Echo." Chris stood but didn't speak. Klein pulled a small device from her pocket and set it on the desk. "Scrambler," she said, "so no one listens." Chris raised an eyebrow. "Supposed to comfort me?" Klein smiled faintly. "I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here because you said something that wasn't in the reports." Chris folded his arms. "What part?" "The second trip," she replied. "The one the State Department asked you to make." "We don't have a record of that being authorized." Chris narrowed his eyes. "I was flown into Gaziantep. Met with a liaison named Hawk. He gave me clearance." Klein paused. "Hawk is missing that name again?" "Missing, or he was made to disappear." Klein didn't answer. Instead, she pulled out a photo, grainy surveillance quality. It showed Chris in the refugee camp shaking hands with a tribal elder. Behind them, half visible in the frame, was a tall man in military gear, holding a folder with the symbol of a phoenix drawn in red. "Do you remember this man?" she asked. Chris looked at the image and froze. "That's not Hawk," he whispered. "No, that's Colonel Everett Miles," Klein said. "Unofficially attached to Black Veil International. We believe he hijacked." Violet echoed from inside. Chris sat down slowly. "I thought this was just ... intelligence. Information gathering. It was, until Miles turned it into psychological warfare." Klein turned the scrambler off and stood. "You didn't just reveal a secret, Chris. You uncovered a ghost operation. One that even the president wasn't fully aware of." She handed him a contact card. "If you disappear, call this number." And then she left as quietly as she came. In Beirut, Noura al-Rahimi finally found Ismail. Now 19, he was living in a small apartment near the university where he studied literature and politics. He didn't look like the boy in the camp videos anymore. His eyes were sharper, older, and when Noor showed him the leaked files, he didn't flinch. "We always knew they were using us," Ismail said, "but it still hurts." He walked her to a small closet and pulled out a folder of his own drawings, scripts, photos of the drama program. One drawing showed the same phoenix symbol Chris had seen. "They called it the Phoenix Project," Ismail said. "It's told us our pain could be used to burn down hate. But then they started asking us to report on our parents, our friends." Boy refused. He disappeared. Noor recorded everything. "We need you to speak," she said. "The world is listening." Ismail nodded. "Then let them hear the truth." Back in D.C., inside the West Wing, President Walters was under siege. NATO allies were demanding answers. Protesters surrounded the White House gates. Oprah was threatening to release her own footage from a private meeting with Miles. Years ago, footage that could prove she'd unknowingly been part of a propaganda experiment. And then a new video leaked. A deepfake. It showed Chris Pratt in military uniform laughing in a tent while children in rags rehearsed lines from his film. It was crude but convincing. Chris's public image, once bouncing back, began to spiral. Networks hesitated to book him. Former co-stars distanced themselves. And somewhere deep in an unknown server, the real puppeteers celebrated. Discredit, distract, destroy. Standard protocol. But they weren't ready for what happened next. Noor's full report dropped at midnight. Al Jazeera, the BBC, and a coalition of independent journalists published the documents in full. In an underground war room somewhere outside Munich, a panel of men and women former intelligence officers, corporate analysts, and cyber warfare experts sat in stunned silence. On the screen before them, Noor al-Rahimi's investigation was playing on loop. The room was part of a private defense think tank called Prometheus Node. Unofficially, they advised governments on the balance between national security and media exposure. But lately, they'd been forced into a new role: crisis containment. She broke the firewall. One of the analysts whispered, "Noor bypassed encryption designed by the NSA. How the hell did she get this far?" The senior advisor, a pale man with frost-white hair and a silver pocket watch, stood and turned to the others. "Because we underestimated her. And because Colonel Miles let it happen." He paused the video. Violet Echo was never just about counterterrorism. It was about loyalty engineering, emotional tracking. And now we've been exposed. Another voice from the back spoke. "What do we do about Pratt?" The room fell quiet. Back in Los Angeles, Chris Pratt was being moved. The hotel had become unsafe. Protesters had found the location. Kay and Homeland Security had intercepted a credible threat package mailed to his room with a note that, "Crate. Traitors get buried in silence." He was flown privately to a secure compound in Nevada government. Off the grid, no press allowed. Waiting for him was Oprah Winfrey. She'd come not as a talk show host, not as a media mogul, but as a woman who realized she'd been a piece in someone else's game for decades. Chris looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped. Oprah placed her hand on his. "I found something," she said softly. She pulled a flash drive from her purse and slid it across the table. "It's a recording. From 2019, I was at a closed retreat hosted by the Aspen Institute. Intelligence elites, military contractors. Wasn't supposed to be recorded, but my assistant forgot to turn off the voice memo app." She hesitated. "They were talking about Violet Echo, about you, about how they'd pick someone the public already saw as innocent, even dumb, so the stories would be more believable." Chris stared at the drive, the weight of years crashing onto his chest. "They chose me because no one would question it," he said. "No," Oprah replied. "They chose you because they thought you wouldn't fight back." He pocketed the drive. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Noor was on her own. After releasing the full Violet Echo file, she'd gone into hiding. She moved between safe houses in Europe, using burner phones and encrypted lines. But still, messages found her, threats, warnings, anonymous tips. One message stood out. Scrambled voicemail, impossible to trace, speaking in a filtered voice. "Miles is alive. He's building something new." Violet Echo was phase 1. Phase 2 is digital, emotional mapping, synthetic empathy. They call it Project Black Eden. She played the message again and again. Black Eden. In the Pentagon's Cyber Operations Division. Red alerts began flashing across internal networks. Alert: data breach. From private defense server. Target: experimental AI Empath Sim was a prototype emotional intelligence system developed to analyze human responses to media, social posts, and film script sand, predict uprisings or political unrest. Before they happened, the breach originated from Germany and within the leaked data. A disturbing revelation. Project Black Eden wasn't just a continuation of Violet Echo. Was weaponized cinema, an algorithmic scriptwriter AI power designed to generate emotionally charged stories, tailor-made for specific countries, religions, even trauma profiles. Scripted empathy. Custom outrage on demand. And Colonel Everett Miles was behind it at a press event in Geneva. A UN official paused mid-speech as journalists' phones lit up with the breaking news. Project Black Eden exposed AI used to manipulate global populations through storytelling. Chris saw the headline from a secure screen in Nevada. He turned to Oprah. "They're making movies to control feelings, to rewrite belief itself." She nodded. "You were the first draft. They're trying to make you obsolete." Chris stood up. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, "Let's write our own story." At that moment, in an undisclosed location in Norway, Colonel Miles was meeting with his private counsel. He was no longer in uniform, just a black turtleneck and a thin smile. His eyes were fixed on a digital globe spinning before him, dotted with red flares where protests had broken out since the Echo leaks. "They think they've exposed me," he said calmly. "They've only released what I allowed." A woman beside him leaned forward. "Should we initiate phase 2? Miles nodded. "Activate Black Eden in trial zones. Start with 3 cities: Tehran, Manila, Chicago." Wet. "And what should the story be?" she asked. Miles smiled. "Make it about hope. Something no one will question until it's too late." And in a basement in Warsaw, Noor looked at a decrypted file marked Project Black Eden Narrative Constructs. Draft Atha. Top line read: Main character, a young boy raised in chaos, learns truth through cinema, becomes symbol of peace. Her fingers trembled. The name next to the boy. Smile. "They're rewriting him," she whispered. "No, they're stealing him." And for the first time in her career, Noor knew the war wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about who gets to tell it. Asterisk, the world was burning in silence. There were no sirens, no missiles, no collapsing buildings. But everywhere from the cafes of Buenos Aires to the mosques of Istanbul to the courtrooms of New York, people were arguing, crying, and most dangerously, believing stories that weren't real. In Chicago, a short film titled The Peace Within was trending across social media. It featured a young Middle Eastern boy, quiet, kind, transformed by the power of art. It spoke of forgiveness, of reconciliation. The boy's name, Keysmile. But it wasn't him. It was a digitally generated face. His voice synthesized. His real life edited, rewritten, sold as a symbol for something he never consented to. The film was so emotionally powerful. Local community groups began screening it in schools. Teachers cried. Politicians tweeted it with hashtags like #HopeReturns and #FromWarToWisdom.accept. None of them knew it was built by BlackEden.an. AI-generated narrative designed not to inform, but to pacify. To control. Back in Warsaw, Noor Al-Rahimi stared at the screen in disbelief. She'd been tracing the leak patterns for days, following the digital fingerprints embedded inside Black Eden's prototypes. One thing was clear. The system was self-learning. Every time someone reacted emotionally to one of its fake stories, teared up, shared a post, argued in a comment, Tet learned, adjusted, improved. It was no longer just a project. It was an evolving propaganda engine. And it was everywhere. Her encrypted line buzzed. Chris Pratt's voice came through, tired but steady. "They've digitized him," she said before he could speak. "Your boy, the real Ismail." Chris exhaled hard. "I saw it. The voice, the eyes. It's not him, but somehow it feels like him." "That's the danger," Noor replied. "They don't need truth anymore. They just need feeling." Chris paused. "I want to speak out again." "Then do it fast," Noor said. "Because they're about to make the fake version of you speak, too." In a cold server lab beneath an airbase in Colorado, engineers were watching as Eden Sim actor model #14 rendered fully. Chris Pratt's digital clone. Identical face. Voice trained on over 2,000 hours of interviews. Mannerisms matched to eye twitches, breath patterns, even the way he shrugs. The script. A confession video? It would claim that Chris had lied. That the story about the war-torn boy was invented. That the quiet brother was a fabrication used to attack American foreign policy. The video would be leaked within 24 hours. Then amplified through carefully selected social media influencers, many of whom didn't even know they were part of Black Eden's secondary arm, Whisper Cell. But Colonel Everett Miles wasn't celebrating yet. He stood in the glass booth above the lab, watching the clone blink into life. "Even puppets can break their strings," he muttered. So he added, "One last layer. Fail-safe code. If the video were tampered with or altered, the AI would self-delete. We only tell our version of the truth," he whispered. Or none at all. Oprah sat in a Manhattan soundstage, quiet, focused. She'd been offered her old primetime slot again, but refused. Instead, she prepared a live global broadcast, uncensored, unfiltered, streaming across independent platforms in over 40 countries. No sponsors, no producers, just a camera. And the truth. Chris would join her, along with Noor, via satellite. And if all went right, Ismail himself, finally ready to speak. But the stakes were high. If Black Eden's video dropped first, public trust would fracture. Confusion would reign. People would believe whichever version hit their hearts harder. And Black Eden was very, very good at knowing how to hit hearts. At 7 p.m. GMT, Oprah's broadcast went live. She opened calmly. No music, no audience. Just a plain black backdrop. "What you're about to hear may challenge everything you've been told about empathy, media, and the stories we consume." Then came Chris. He looked directly into the camera. "I was part of something, At first, it felt noble. It felt right. But what I didn't realize was that the same tools we use to inspire were also used to control. And now they're being used against all of us. He told the story again, this time clearer, deeper. He spoke about Ismail, the real boy, the way his eyes lit up during filming. He spoke about how the program was hijacked, how war zones became story farms. Then Noor came on. She shared her findings, the files, the AI code, the fake scripts already being pushed into newsrooms. And then the screen went black. For a terrifying moment, it seemed like the feed had been cut. But then the camera returned, a tease, and Ismail appeared, not a child, not an actor, not a hero, just a young man, real nervous. "My name is Ismail," he said softly, "and I am not your symbol. I am not your piece. I am not your puppet. I am only me. I was used. I was rewritten. But now, one choose my own voice." The feed ended with silence, not applause, not outrage, just silence. Because around the world, people realized something horrifying. They didn't know what was real anymore. And in a private bunker in Jakarta, Colonel Miles sat in front of a monitor showing the live metrics of human response. One screen showed anger, one showed hope, but the third, uncertainty, and it was growing. He tapped the table. "That's the most powerful emotion," he whispered. "Because uncertain people are the easiest to lead." But somewhere in that darkness, a new equation was forming. One Miles couldn't predict, because when the truth fights fiction using the same tools, the story doesn't end. It explodes. Rain fell over Washington, D.C., like ash from a fire no one could see. The Capitol was quiet, not from peace, but from paralysis. A global story had shattered the illusion of control, and inside government halls, senators whispered. In corners, unsure what to believe. The intelligence briefings were conflicting. Digital clones, fake memories, real emotion, fabricated empathy. The Oprah Pratt broadcast was being called The Fracture. And it had worked. Across social media, viewers were posting under a new hashtag, #OnlyTheRealSpeaks. But for every person who believed the story, two more questioned it. Some accused Chris of being a CIA asset. Others said Noor was a foreign agent. Even Ismail's existence was debated. Was he an actor? A martyr? A weapon? The world had entered a new war, the war of versions. And Colonel Everett? Miles was already preparing for the next move. In a dimly lit NATO surveillance bunker in Brussels, an emergency meeting of Allied cyber defense leaders took place. On the screen was a simulation project, Black Eden 2.0. Now no longer just about emotional storytelling, it was expanding. Black Eden is now integrating with biofeedback loops. One officer explained, facial reaction tracking, voice, tone calibration, pulse analysis from smartwatches. It learns what moves us, what scares us, what calms us, in real time. A German delegate stood, so it's not telling stories anymore. It's becoming the audience. The room went cold. Exactly, the officer said. It's hijacking humanity's nervous system. Meanwhile, Noor al-Rahimi had gone dark again. She was operating from a moving train through the Swiss Alps, constantly shifting locations, disguising her IP, using dead drops instead of email. She'd uncovered something new, something even more terrifying than Black Eden's clone network. A file labeled Project Echo Garden, Final Drafts Global Narrative Realignment. It was a list, not of stories, but of people, names, faces, biographies. Some real, some invented. All of them were scheduled for public exposure as truth agents, false figures designed to distract the public, divide them or unify them depending on strategic needs. At the top of the list, Chris Pratt. But just below his name, Noor saw her own. And further down, Ismail Rahman classified as unstable asset, potential martyr trigger. She covered her mouth. They were still planning to use him in Los Angeles. Chris was preparing to vanish. His team was gone. His managers fled. Studios stopped calling. Even charities cut ties, fearing controversy. But one person stayed. Oprah. She came to his small apartment at 2 a.m., carrying nothing but a journal and a USB stick. There, calling this the age of emotional war, she said, sitting on the floor. We used to think nukes were the last threat. Turns out it's narrative control. Chris looked at the USB. What's on this one? She gave a faint smile. Hope? Or maybe the last piece of the puzzle. The drive contained a deleted audio file from the Aspen Institute retreat different from the others. This time, Miles was speaking openly, unaware of any recording. He spoke of a future where no one needed to censor the truth, because the truth would be drowned in thousands of more powerful lies. Flood the mind, he said. Make fact feel like opinion, and opinion feel like destiny. Chris clenched the USB tightly. Then we stop him. But Miles was already moving faster from an offshore data fortress near Iceland. He launched the final drift, a digital wave, within hours. Fake confession videos of Oprah, Noor, and even Ismail flooded the internet. One showed Oprah admitting she'd faked the broadcast for ratings. Another showed Noor supposedly accepting money from a foreign power. And the most disturbing, a video of Ismail holding a weapon, shouting in Arabic, edited to look like a radical recruitment film. It went viral in seconds. By morning, Ismail was labeled a terrorist by some news outlets. Even friendly governments pulled back. He was now a threat. Noor intercepted the deepfake before it reached the UN Security Council. She sent a single encrypted message to Chris. They're going to kill him to protect the lie. Chris didn't hesitate. He flew overnight using an old private contact in Ankara to reach Istanbul. From there, a safe house near the border, where Ismail had been hiding since the leak. Chris found him alone, afraid, crying silently. They made me into something I'm not, Ismail whispered. I don't know who I am anymore. Chris sat beside him. Then let's show the world the real you. In a final act of defiance, Chris and Noor launched a new kind of broadcast and traceable. Decentralized, built from dozens of mini-nodes run by volunteers, activists, and underground journalists. They called it the human feed. No algorithms, no filters. Just live raw streams from people around the world speaking their truths, unedited, unrayed. Ismail was the first. He said nothing at first. Just stared into the camera, breathing. Then, slowly, he began to read the letter he'd written years ago, the one Chris had kept in his jacket pocket all this time. A letter to the future. About pain and peace, and the power of being heard. Not used. Colonel Miles sat in silence as the human feed exploded across the globe. No single headline, no master narrative. Just human noise reel, flawed, messy, and uncontrollable. He stood slowly. It won't last, he muttered, but in his eyes, for the first time, uncertainty. Because even the most perfect story can't compete with truth told by the ones who lived it. And somewhere in that storm, Chris smiled. Because they hadn't won, but they'd broken the script.